The Latino vote is a key swing in the key swing states. And if you watched the conventions, you knew that both parties were doing their best to court the Latino vote. From the speakers chosen to appear at the lectern to the consistent focus on issues near and dear to Latino voters, this election may just hinge on which party did a better job. Joining me now is Representative Linda Sánchez, Democratic Congresswoman from the state of California and a member of both the Congressional Hispanic and Congressional Progressive Caucuses. Congresswoman, thank you for joining us tonight. So let me ask you, and I know what your answer is going to be, but who did a better job closing the deal? And let me ask it this way. Do you think Presidents Clinton and Obama have closed the deal such that the Latino vote simply won't go to Mitt Romney at this point?
Well, I think it's important to note that the Latino vote as a bloc is not monolithic, but I think the vast majority of Latinos were convinced by what they heard at the Democratic Convention that there's a party that really shares their values of hard work and opportunity and making sure that we are doing what we can to preserve the ability for the next generation to live the American dream in this country.
And it seems to me there are so many different pieces of this that are critical. One is the budget, which we'll get to in a minute. The Paul Ryan, Mitt Romney budget really devastates the safety net, the core assistance that is given to those who want to work hard and succeed. And then there's the DREAM Act, where you have President Obama acting in a way that says to immigrants, we understand what your dream is all about.
Absolutely. Not to mention increases in Pell Grants so that kids who have the capability have the financial ability to go to college. Democratic Party decreasing student loan interest rates so that more people have those opportunities. I'm a product of student loans. Without them, I wouldn't have been able to attend law school and have all the opportunities that having that law degree opened up to me. So, you know, you go down issue after issue, whether it's small business or, you know, social services, Social Security, Medicare. Those are the touchstones for Hispanic families. That's what helps them lift the next generation up on their shoulders.
And as you point out, it's not a handout, it's a hand up. And these are programs that have given people the opportunity to work hard and then succeed, and yet they're the very parts of the budget that Paul Ryan wants to cut.
Absolutely. They are the tools for success. It still depends on the individual's determination and their hard work to make themselves successful. They at least provide that opportunity. And if you look at the Ryan budget, it just decimates everything that Latino families hold near and dear to their heart.
And when you look at the budget, it is the Romney, Ryan, Todd Aiken budget, not only on the social issues, which, you know, we don't need to get into right now, but abortion, guns, all those issues, but also when Todd Aiken referred to Pell Grants and government assistance in education as the third degree of cancer, sort of creeping socialism, you react by saying, wait a minute, they don't get what government can and should do.
No, they really don't. And that's a difference in terms of members who serve in government that come from perspectives where they've utilized those programs and they understand the value of it and they've paid it back, versus people who've never had to worry about making rent and writing their tuition check in the same month. They just don't have a fundamental understanding of how necessary these programs are for middle-class families to thrive.
And also how virtually everybody at one point or another has been the beneficiary. There is a sense among the Mitt Romneys of the world that, my goodness, we did it on our own, why can't you? That's simply not true.
Absolutely. There's this fallacy that people do it all on their own, and it takes a community to make people successful. You know, for businesses and people that created them, they may believe that they did it all on their own, but, you know, all the infrastructure that gets clients to their front door, the government paid for, all of the tax incentives or in some industries the subsidies, those are what get businesses their starts, and yet it's looked at either as virtuous for them but bad that everybody else gets some kind of assistance, or it's looked at as I did it all on my own and nobody really helped me, which is not true.
We all want to believe in the virtue of our own goodness, and we did it on our own. It'd be nice if it were true, but it's a mythology, and I think once we get rid of that mythology, we're all healthier as a consequence. Let's talk about the raw politics of the conventions. Both parties tried to put up at the lectern a litany, a sequence of Latino voters, of speakers. Who did better just in terms of raw performance?
I mean, for me, what killed it is you just looked across the crowd when the cameras panned, and you saw no diverse faces in the Republican crowd. And you looked at the Democratic convention, and you could see that when they talk about we are the party that is the party of inclusion, that you know, wants to help everybody in this country, and you saw those faces in the crowd, that spoke volumes about what the party stands for. But I think definitely the speakers that knocked it out of the park for the Democrats, Julian Castro, mayor of San Antonio, Texas, just lit the place on fire. And while the Republicans tried, and this is what I always find very interesting, on the one hand they try by sprinkling in Spanish phrases or having one maybe or two selected, Hispanic speakers. You don't see them in the audience, you don't see them represented at the table, and the messages that they're sending to them on the one hand are, hey, we're your party, but their policies on the other hand are shoving Latinos as far away as they possibly could.
Right. And I think you actually changed my question in a much better, and it made it more interesting and more important. It's not who's behind the lectern, it's who's in the audience.
Absolutely.
And both parties, I think, did a good job having persuasive. Marco Rubio was a good speaker. I listened to him, I don't agree with him, but both parties had effective speakers behind the lectern. But as you say, who matters are those in the audience, where you had a diverse audience and crowd for the Democratic Party, but a monochromatic audience for the Republican Party.
Right. It's who is allowed to participate, and you can see that chosen one or two, dare I say it, even token people of color were on the stage at the Republican convention, but who really includes people in the process? The Democratic Party all the way.
And then you see Mitt Romney, who wants to pretend he's inclusive and talks about immigration in a certain manner. Then he suddenly shows up with Jan Brewer and other voices who are really nativist in their approach to the immigration issue.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Jan Brewer is toxic for the Republican Party in terms of the Latino vote, and the more that they embrace her, the more that they're going to push Latino community away. I find it highly ironic that Mitt Romney has these strident positions about immigration and Dreamers, given that his family fled to Mexico and lived there for a time, and they accepted them and they welcomed him, and yet somehow we're suspect in this country through Mitt Romney's eyes.
Well, Congresswoman, one of my favorite stories is that Eleanor Roosevelt or FDR, nobody's quite clear whom, or maybe both, spoke to the Daughters of the American Revolution, who claimed to go back to the Mayflower, began the speech by saying, fellow immigrants. We are all immigrants at one point or another. The moment we forget that, we are all in bad situation. California Congresswoman Linda Sánchez, thank you so much for your time and insights tonight.
My pleasure.
New citizens mean new politics, and that's shaking up Washington. We'll talk about it with Congresswoman Luis Gutierrez ahead on Viewpoint.